if you want to be a writer and take this work more seriously and put your stuff out there and make strides and make an impact, branding is the way to do it. When you do make intentional choices, not only does it help your audience know you, it's really clarifying for you as the author.
Should an author worry about branding before they're published? And what exactly is an author brand? Is it just colors and fonts and a logo? Is a designer an important part of the branding process? And what happens if you have a teeny tiny budget? My guest today is Karla Colahan, and she's going to be answering some of these questions. And we're going to get into this nitty gritty about branding as an author. I've invited Karla on the podcast because she is the creative director and brand designer of the Inspired Foundry, which is a creative studio that likes to collaborate with entrepreneurs, specifically creatives. She has worked with many of my author friends, and so I knew she would be one of the most people to come on here and talk about all things branding. Welcome, Karla. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. This is so fun. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So let's do it.
All right, well, let's get right to it. What exactly is branding and why should authors pay attention to it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So it's such a big question and can feel overwhelming and daunting. But I always tell my clients, if you want to make money, you can build a business. You want to make an impact, you build a brand. And so the brand piece of a business, it's really just the front facing side of things. It's how people experience you and your work. It's kind of the vibe you want people to feel when they interact with your work. It's the story that you tell. And the visuals are a huge part of that: logos, fonts, colors, design elements, all those, fun part of building a business. Those play a big role, but they're just they're just the tip of the iceberg if the entire business and brand is your story. So I feel like for authors in particular, they're really focused on building a personal brand. You are the author. You are the face of your work. It's probably your name or a pseudonym or a pen name or whatever it might be, but it's still you. And so authors are always building, in my opinion anyway, personal brands. You are sharing about your work behind the scenes. You're telling the stories from the book when you show up to do like a book tour or something like that. It is you. And so our goal in the branding world is to create a cohesive and consistent experience across platforms, which doesn't just mean online, but in person too. Anything you're handing out, the literal covers of your books, merchandise, accessories, all of the things that can kind of go into a full brand experience. We want to make sure that all of that feels seamless across the board. So when someone checks out your website to seeing you in person to your social media, they get the same feeling. They want to dive in deeper. They want to know more. They want to get to know you. And that's a long answer, but that's what a brand is. It's just you,
So for the author who hasn't been published yet, who maybe is looking specifically, I'm thinking of authors who are wanting to go to the traditional route. So they're not published yet. They don't have anything specific to sell. They're, maybe querying agents and editors and stuff. How important is it for them to have a brand?
I think you can make the argument that it's as important as if you did have things published or if you were already a published author. I think the more that you can do ahead of, whatever goals you have ahead of achieving those, the better setup for success you'll be on the other side of things. I've heard often that publishers and, the marketing team want people to have a certain number of followers or to whatever. There's stats and data, and I'm sure you talk about that a lot. But from a branding perspective, I think the more connection you have with your audience, so thinking about audience engagement, how engaged are they on your platform, on your social media, how many subscribers you have to a newsletter or something like that. I feel like it's so much about how you connect with the audience, because ultimately that's what's going to do well for the marketing people who have to promote your stuff, right? They want to know that there's people on the other side of it who are interested in having conversations about the work that you're doing. So when it comes to early stages, what can you be doing to build conversations? more you talk about what you do and why you do it, the easier it will be to continue talking about it. You'll start to get to know your own message and how you want to come across. And those are the big pieces that we really need to hone in, to funnel things through for a really strong brand. So yeah, I would say start developing conversation skills with your audience in kind of a digital way and figure out how that feels best.
Yeah. And I think too, I would just add on there that sometimes I think we forget as authors that we're selling ourselves to the agent or to the publisher. And so if they can't easily get an idea of who we are from our brand, then how will they be able to either, as an agent, be able to present that to a publisher or an editor be able to present that to the pub board when they're trying to pitch you? Having a brand, I think, just gives them a better understanding of who you are or who you are to convey to an audience. And so that better allows them to pitch you or to even know that they want to pick you up. And so
Yeah.
that's helpful too. So when it comes to branding, what do you think authors should pay attention to? Like, what are the key pieces of branding? What are the little pieces that bring that cohesive vision of who you are?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, when I'm working with clients, we always start with brand strategy. So, brand strategy is really just a term for understanding the basics of who you are, what you do, why you do it, and who you do it for. So, it's understanding yourself and your audience. Um, those things are like the primary focus for anybody in the early stages of building a business in general, but especially for authors working on your message. It's not just about your writing, it's about you. It's about your own story, and bringing those pieces of the puzzle into the branding equation will make everything else come out a lot stronger. So it's the difference between arbitrarily picking some colors and fonts because you like them and they look pretty, and actively making, good creative decisions based on who your audience is, how you wanna come across to them. So many different options out there, and I think, as far as, like, branding choices with the visual identity, you could it's you can't really go wrong. I mean, you can, but if you're coming from a place of strategic foundational elements of your business, knowing for sure who you are and how you wanna come across, all of those visual pieces will come together much faster. So we start with brand strategy, and then I would say kind of developing a mood or a style. I'll do lots of mood boards. It's, the time to hang out on Pinterest and source all of the things. That's skimming through magazines and anything from interior design to food to landscape photography to anything that kind of evokes a feeling, any kind of imagery that evokes a feeling can help you decide on the general direction of where you're gonna go, visually speaking. So then once you have that, it's really the other basic foundational elements are fonts and colors.
Mhm.
It's pretty much it. I think authors, when you're developing a personal brand, a logo doesn't matter as much. If you can pick a great font, then your name's gonna look good no matter what.
Mhm.
Um, I think developing a logo is something that maybe makes more sense down the road, and that your time is better spent right now making really intentional decisions about fonts and colors specifically, because those will be the things that you're using over and over and over and over and over again on social media to develop those relationships, to give publishers an idea of who you are. The logo does that, but only to a certain extent. So it's everything else coming together to create that conversation.
Mm. So I'm thinking specifically about the fiction writer who, you mentioned messaging and it's like, who are you? What's your message? And I think this is something that we particularly struggle with because it's really hard to say what the message is because it's a novel, right? It's a
Mhm.
story. And that can change from book to book, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
it can feel a little bit hard to nail that down.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or suggestions on maybe questions that an fiction author can ask themselves to kind of frame that strategy?
Yeah. I think everybody, fiction or not, really should be looking at their brand from a 30,000-foot view. Any decision that you make about what you offer, about what you're writing about, should come from, this lens of this 30,000-foot view. So really, if you pigeonhole yourself into this one particular novel that has this particular message, that's all you're going to be writing about. And you don't want that. You want the creative freedom to do whatever you're inspired to do, right? So how can you look from a bird's eye view at what matters to you the most? And so often this is like core values, 3 to 5 words that uh, really describe the impact you want to make on people, that describes what matters the most to you. And perhaps even coming up with a really, really short, succinct, like 3 to 5 word why, a brand why that says, I'm here to do this work. Like for me, the Inspired Foundry is here to create beauty. 30,000 foot view. I'm really the only one who knows it or sees it or pays attention to it. But everything that I do is filtered through that lens. And it's broad enough that I could kind of do whatever I want to a certain extent, um, keeping within like, I'm a brand designer, so how do we, create beauty in that way? But for authors, like I've worked with a lot of authors, and they have the same struggle of like, well, I want to write about a lot of different things. I want to write about this, and this novel's about this piece, but it deals with like 15 different themes. Well, that's amazing. You as the author get to decide top level what matters to you the most. And it's not that other things don't matter. It's that what's the broadest spectrum that you can, the broadest stroke that you can, paint with, so that everything else you do can be filtered through. Does that make sense?
That was so good. That was so helpful. I know even just for myself, as you're saying it, I'm like, yeah, that makes like you do have to pull back a little bit. I think sometimes,
Yeah.
especially novelists, we get like so in
Mhm.
the nitty gritty. And I'm thinking of like fantasy writers who do like world building. Like that's essentially what
Mhm.
you're doing that with a brand. You're
Yeah.
building a
Yeah.
world, right? It's the
Totally.
common language, it's the common, values and things that are being conveyed through. And so I just think about that sometimes we as novelists can get like so in the weeds of our books that we forget that there's a bigger goal that we're trying to do. And so
Yeah.
I found that helpful. So thank you for stating that. I just know there's some listener who is like, yeah, but really does it really matter what colors I have or what fonts I have or like, where am I even gonna use this other than my website? Like, where else would it possibly show up? What would you say to that author who is kind of skeptical?
I would say there's 2 tracks that you can take. You can kind of, DIY something for the moment. And in the early days, that's where a lot of this end up. You can kind of just do whatever you see trend-wise that's out there. You can just, pull directly from Canva, not edit anything, and put it out into the world, and it would be fine. But there's something about when you do make intentional choices, when you do take the time to really think about who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it, that when you pull in the visual side of things, not only does it help your audience know who you are and get to know you a little bit better from an instant, like, 5 second, gonna look at your graphic and decide whether or not I want to know more of, about you. But it's really clarifying for you as the author. You suddenly feel more professional. You suddenly are like, oh, well, look at me go. Have colors and fonts that feel great to me. And I'm so excited to go work on this stuff. Like there's from every author that I've worked with, they come in and they're like, I don't know how to make these decisions. And like, I don't really want to, I want to like write. That's all I want to do. I just want to write. The people that I tend to work with also really value aesthetics. So it's important to them to show up and look good. And so for a skeptic, I would say, well, what's underneath that skepticism? Is it a fear of being seen? Is it like a fear that your work's not good enough? Is it imposter syndrome? Is it, there's probably some deeper stuff there that you could go to therapy and work on or journal about, write about, figure it out. Um, but I think that it does matter insofar as if you want to be a writer and take this work more seriously and put your stuff out there and make strides and make an impact, branding is the way to do it. And it's not a cutting corners kind of situation. If anything, it's gonna fast track you, right? Rather than like spinning the wheel over and over again, choosing different fonts and colors every time, starting from scratch. Every time you have to post something, like that's exhausting. It's a waste of time too. So it's like do the work now and you'll be, miles ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, but it is an important part. of our work is doing like newsletters and
Mhm.
having things that are already set up and so that you can create a template so you're not having to design a newsletter every time you send it out. Or
Yeah.
when you go on podcasts, being able to give them the graphics that they need to put that, on their website to promote you.
Yeah.
Just these little things that come into play as you are trying to get a book deal, even a business card or even your proposal when you're presenting your proposal. Like even those little things matter and they do come into play. And so I think it is worth making those intentional decisions about. And like you said, it saves you the headache of having to make a decision every time you go down, sit down. And I know I get caught up in, like, scrolling through all the Canva graphics and, like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, just one of them jump out at me, please. And
Mhm.
that's just a waste of time, just a waste.
Yep.
So as far as the mistakes that authors make, and I'm sure there's plenty of them that you can mention, what are some of the things that you see authors do that you can just say, "Oh, that's just that's just not hitting right." Like, that's actually hurting you. What you're doing is actually hurting the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest one is the one that we just named, which is starting from scratch every single time.
Mhm.
Not only is it a waste of time, but it is something that will, erode the trust between you and your audience because they're just not quite sure what to expect, and they might find somebody else to, invest their time and energy in. So that's a big one. I think templates are really helpful in that case, things that, like you have templatized for yourself. Hi, this is my quote graphic template, and I use this
Mhm.
one every time, or like change the background color. But as far as fonts and colors go, you're staying within a consistent framework that you have devised or have worked with a designer to devise so that you don't waste time starting from scratch. There's other basic design principles, and when I think about templates in general, what comes from Canva, their graphic designer designed templates, like for Instagram posts in particular, they're already implementing things like basic design principles with type hierarchy, colors that are going to like contrast wise work really well and be legible. And so if you are working with Canva templates, know that they are designed well and all you need to do is just change the text a little bit, right? Like changing sizing and
Yeah.
moving things around might not be in your best interest. So understanding basic design principles can be helpful, or at least encouraging yourself to work with things that are already pre-designed and not starting from scratch there. Um, I think there are other things too around like uh, when it comes to social media in particular. There's one author that does this really, really well, Emily B. Riddle. She is a fiction writer, novelist, and, she has a tiny brand, and so she's consistently using the same colors and the same fonts and the same design elements across not only her static posts, but her videos. So,
Mm.
like, she pulls everything in for everything that she's doing. Um, she does a really great job of showing her face, which I think is something that maybe authors, they're behind the scenes, they're behind the screen, they're just
Yeah.
that's just the word, show your face. People want to know you, see who you are. It's
Mhm.
you, you're a personal brand. That's a part of the personal brand is your face. Molly LaCroix does this pretty well. She's a therapist and writes uh, really great books on sort of scripture and from a therapist perspective. She has a tiny brand as well, and she doesn't do like a ton of face work, and I know that's something that she's working on. But
Yeah.
her graphics are always on point, and they're also themed around whichever book she's talking about. Her graphics kind of pull in that stuff. So um, sub branding, or just if you're working on a particular project, making sure that everything is funneled through that lens.
Some of the things I think I've noticed is authors using too many different kind of fonts on the same graphic.
Oh, yep, yep. Too many fonts, not a good
Too
idea. I
many
would
fonts.
say
Yeah.
2,
Or
you can get away with 2. 3 is, like, wonderful. Any more than that is incorrect, you know? Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate what graphic designers can do because I don't know how you guys do it, picking the colors that complement each other and like
Mhm.
having a color palette that works cohesively. I mean, I don't, it's just not my natural ability to do. Oh, like, I'm
Yeah.
always impressed by, graphic designers being able to do that, and even the fonts too, like, fonts that work well together. I know there's rules for that and whatnot, but what you do goes beyond that. You really go into, like, what is that called? Like, the color, psychology, right? Is that what
Mhm.
it is? Like,
Yeah.
color
Yeah.
theory and how, like, what a certain color says to the person who sees it, and,
Mhm.
you kinda dig into that when you're creating a brand for somebody, right? And so
Yep.
can you talk a
100%.
little bit about that, about how it's not just about picking things that aesthetically look good and play with aesthetic rules, but really represents the person visually?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, color theory, and seasonal branding, which if you need a great resource for seasonal branding, Fiona Humberstone of The Brand Stylist is our queen. She is it. She's fabulous. I think a lot of us learn about color theory, seasonal branding from her specifically. She talks a lot about how color has energy, right? It's going to give off a certain vibe. And even like with seasonal branding speaks a little bit more to the the dynamic energy of a particular color. So like the Target red, for instance, is very saturated. It is bold. It has a lot of energy to it. Psychology wise, red is all about like being a little bit assertive and strong and like um motivated. And Target balances that by recently they changed their branding out in the last like 10 years to have their name be all lowercase. It's very
Mm,
like neighborhood, it's very friendly,
yeah,
it's very approachable, but it's still got like that energy of red. And that's like everybody knows, Target. Green is a lot of fresh, alive, uh, vibrant, restful, abundant. It kind of both seasonal branding and color theory work together basically with kind of what you expect out of nature, you know?
yeah.
Green, growth, aliveness, right? Um, the interesting thing is with seasonal branding, especially that when you start to add in more gray to a color, it's dustier, it's a little moodier, right? So you can still have a red, but you tone it down with a little bit of gray if your energy isn't like assertive. Let's go. It's a little bit more
Right.
like I'm motivated and passionate, but from a slightly more calm perspective. Well, you added more gray, a little bit more lightness to it, right? Or uh, you lean it towards pink, which is all about compassion and nurturing and kindness and empathy. Blues are all like loyalty and intelligence, clear communication, reflection, clarity. Um, Purple is wisdom and vision, truth. Uh, I work with a lot of when I do like wellness brands, we're often focusing on purples, greens, blues, and you'll find that you'll start to see that more as you think about color psychology and why
Mhm.
people are picking certain colors. I think in the digital space, it's really nice. Sometimes, like when you're driving around in a town and you see store logos and stuff, oftentimes they're very saturated and that's like, attention grabbing, physical world, whatever. In the digital space, we have a little bit more nuance, right? Because our
Mm,
screens are able to capture more color. We can um, go on the dusty side or the lighter side or the more pastel side of colors. We don't always have to be so forward facing with the intensity and the saturation of color. But yeah, I mean, listen to me go on. I could go on for another hour
yeah.
about color.
And fonts are the same way too, right? Fonts can, like, certain font types have convey certain, I mean, like you just mentioned, all lowercase even, like,
Mhm.
even the even a intentional decision about uppercase or lowercase, all
Yep.
caps, whatever you want, you know, a script versus a, yeah, that can all play a role in that. Your goal as a designer is to ultimately capture that person and their messaging into a visual
Mhm.
representation. Obviously, you love to do this because this is the
I,
thing you do on a daily
yeah.
basis. Do you has it ever been hard to do for somebody? Or do you normally are you normally able to ask the right questions? You can kinda get a good sense of who the person is?
Yeah, I try really hard to ask good questions up front to get a general sense. I'll usually also ask for an inspiration board from Pinterest or, like I'll often say, is there a particular brand that you resonate with, even if it's not in your industry, or um, thinking about spaces that feel like you that you want to spend time in, asking those kinds of questions so that I get a sense of what they like and what they gravitate towards, so that I
Mhm.
don't do something like, completely
Like
incorrect and that they'll
different.
totally
Yeah.
hate. Yeah. Um, but yes, there have been times where it's tricky, and it's often when people have trouble like letting go of control, you know? Like no, but I really thought I wanted this. And
Yeah.
depending on the client and our relationship, sometimes it's like, I want you to have what you want. Here you go. And sometimes
Mhm.
it's like, no, I'm going to push you on this because you think you're all this like light, quiet energy, but you're writing about really hard things, or you're writing about stuff that's not light and happy all the time. Like
Mhm.
I don't want to give you a brand that feels bypassing or that
Yeah.
feels, I want to help you represent yourself with the depth that you are trying to put into the world and to with the conversations that you're starting. It's not easy stuff, right? So there are times when I will push back. I think um, it's hard to know yourself. It's hard to read your own label from inside the jar. I rarely have clients who come to me and say, my style is like East Coast nautical. I require a serif font and blah, like
Yeah.
a lot of times they have the feeling, or like they can look at a picture and say yes or no, and so um it's never, I never want people to feel when they're working with me that they can't share what they like, or that I'm some, the end all be all with branding. I don't know you. I've met you for 20 minutes, like I'm making educated guesses based on your answers to the questions I've asked and all those kinds of things. But I do want input. I always want it to feel like a collaboration, that you feel like you're getting the best possible result, because I'm not just blindly taking your answers and doing what I think is best. It's a mix of both. It's a mix of what you want and what I feel will be a good fit, and what's going to be the most successful for you to work with on your own, because you're probably not going to hire me for full time, right? Like you
Mhm.
need to be able to do some stuff by yourself. So
Mm.
trying to make that easy and straightforward, and all those kinds
Yeah.
of things. Yeah.
So for the person who's on the fence about hiring a designer to help them with branding, what what words of wisdom do you have for them?
Mm,
Because, Canva does have that little place in it where you can, like, create your brand, where you can, like, you know, pick your colors and put your fonts in there, and it's just there for you ready to go. Um,
yeah.
Obviously, they have templates and stuff. So for the author who's like, "I don't know if it's worth my money, my time, or resources," especially for the one
Mhm.
who maybe has a tinier budget,
Yeah.
why should they pick a designer to work with when it comes to branding?
Yeah. There's 1,000 reasons. I would say the thing I most often tell potential or prospective clients is that it's gonna come down to, like, 2 things. One is your budget, like, literally, how resourced are you and what are you comfortable spending in this particular season? The second thing is, how comfortable are you doing stuff on your own? Because there's 1,000 resources online. You could go to ChatGPT and say, "Hi, what hex color should I use? Here's who I am, blah, blah, blah." Like, there's plenty of ways to be able to do it yourself. You can take the time to learn how to do it yourself and to do it effectively and do it well. But what would you rather be spending your time doing? Like, your craft is writing. That's what you're good at. That's what you wanna be doing. And there are designers like me out there who not only respect your craft, but wanna help you succeed, right? And we've made it our job to do, the other stuff that is fun. Well, okay, so that's the third thing. It's fun to do this stuff. Like, you wanna spend time thinking, I mean, depending on who you are and you like the creative side of things, it can be very fun to spend your time on Pinterest scrolling, looking at colors, picking hex codes. But I often have people say, like, it's fun for the first 30 minutes, and then I don't know how to make a decision about
Mm.
stuff. Um, so at the Inspired Foundry, like, I've made it my goal to help you make those decisions and then hand you back the creative power. because I know budgets are tight and because I know that you'd like to do some of it, but you don't want to have to make those initial decisions, right? Um, if money were no object and you could hire whoever you wanted to, and you were like, I want to fast track to getting my book published in the next 6 months or whatever, maybe you hire a designer who's got more higher end services, more high touch one to one, who's going to deliver a lot of things to you for you so that you don't have to do any of that work. So I think it depends on your capabilities and your interest in doing some of that design work yourself. Um, your confidence in making those decisions in general, and what you're able to spend on a collaboration. Um, I have clients who tell me it's worth every penny, and clients who are like, "Well, we probably could have done less something because I realize that I'm more invested in actually doing these things myself." It really just it depends on the person, it depends on the client, it depends on their situation in life. But I don't think you'll ever be disappointed when you work with somebody else who can help you reflect that magic back to you, whether it's me or somebody else. It's there's something about being seen
Yeah.
truly, you know, and having that reflected to you in fonts and colors that just feels so magical.
I love how you said, this is not your craft. Your craft is writing.
Mm,
Like, that's what we're good at. And I love the fact that you said there's designers out there who want to help you do your craft well by taking off the pressure of this, creating this visual representation of you. They want to
yeah,
help you succeed in what you do. And unfortunately, we live in a world where we can't be hermits anymore. We can't just go off in the woods and write our book and then submit it to some
yeah,
publisher and they take care of the rest. That's not the reality of the publishing industry anymore. And so we have to, if we're going to play the game, if we're going to be part of this industry, we have to show up in a visual way. And why not take the wisdom and the skills of somebody else to help us do that well and do it effectively? And so I would love, Karla, if you could just take a few moments. I know you have a resource out there that our
mm,
listeners can opt into to receive a checklist. And then I also know that you offer, you call it the tiny brand, correct? Is that how the tiny
mhm.
brand? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think especially for authors who have tinier budgets, this might be a really good kind of compromise between those big, high touch, designer packages out there and doing
Yeah.
it yourself on Canva. So
Yep. Yeah. It's designed to be the perfect in between. A tiny brand is really just fonts, colors, and design elements packaged up in a nice style guide with the hex codes and all the font decisions, and a lot of extra support on the back end. And depending on budget, extra brand strategy on the front end to really hone in on who you are in your message before we do visual stuff. So, just to give you a point of reference, packages start at 450, they go up to 1750 and beyond if you want more marketing coaching, more like a dedicated container one-on-one time with me. Um, the opt-in checklist thing is the tiny brand checklist. So it walks you through kind of the 4 stages that I walk all of my clients through, with thinking through strategy, thinking through, the curation of everything, the styling of it all, and the application on the other end. Um, so you're welcome to opt into that and start to DIY some of this yourself, or at least start to ask yourself the questions, and you might come to the conclusion that, "Oh, I don't wanna make all those decisions." And how do you take, an answer to a question like, "Who are you and what do you do?" and turn that into colors and font? There is a little bit of, strategy and a little bit of magic and intuition to that too. So, I love the tiny brand thing. I think I'm on number 112. We've done 112 of them. They, people love them. They work really well. It's exactly what you need and nothing that you don't. So it's a joy to work on, and I love working with authors because they're all so different, you know?
yeah, I can imagine. Yes, you
Yeah.
probably have come across quite a number of different authors. I mean, especially since it's a personal brand. So you really
Mhm.
are trying to capture a person, not necessarily a person, but the person and the work that they do. So for somebody who wants to take you up on this tiny brand, who wants to see everything that you offer and maybe explore what that package might look like, where should they go for that?
Yeah, you can head to yourtinybrand.com and scroll through to see exactly what's inside, the benefits, and kind of the back end support on the other side. And I have a $50 off code for any listeners of this podcast. The code is Inspired Rachel to get $50 off, and would love to collaborate and provide you with a gorgeous brand identity that you can use everywhere for anything you want, and invite you into the Tiny Brand Club afterwards. We do design master classes and daydream hours and on brand sessions. And we talk about more than just the visuals. We talk about the whole brand experience from start to finish, just for my tiny brand clients. So you really get more than just fonts, colors, and design elements. I'm a collaborator. Um, I build community. I really want all of my clients to feel like they have me in their back pocket and in their corner to help them throughout their brand journey. So
Oh, that sounds lovely. And I love that idea because so much of the work we do, especially as authors, feels kind of lonely because we're in this online space and we're doing work at home by ourselves in our offices. And so it can kind of feel like lonely work. And so it's lovely that you've kind of fostered a community so
Mhm.
people don't have to feel alone. They can ask
Uh-huh.
questions and encourage one another. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Karla, for joining us today. I appreciate all the wisdom you've shared, all the little tidbits and insight. And for anybody who wants to follow you on Instagram, you do talk about this stuff on Instagram. So, what's your
Mhm.
Instagram handle?
Yeah, it's just at the Inspired Foundry.
Perfect. So, you guys can go follow Karla there and to learn even more about branding. And make sure to check out the checklist. I'll put that in the show notes and her website, yourtinybrand.com. Check out her package for that. And maybe you'll get a chance to work with her and create something that's a beautiful representation of who you are and what your books are about. So thank you again, Karla, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. Join me back here next week as we continue the conversation on the business of Christian fiction. Bye.